Hello, and welcome to a revision tutorial by MrMcMillanREvis, making revision easier. This tutorial is part of a series on Edexcel GCSE Religious Studies, Unit 3.4, Religion and Community Cohesion. In Part 2, we will look at issues surrounding prejudice, discrimination, and the law. What is meant by prejudice and discrimination? We begin with prejudice. This word derives from the word prejudge. In other words, it means to make a judgment about a person or group without having enough information to make an accurate judgment. Prejudice is often based on the use of stereotypes. To stereotype is to assume that all people of a certain group share the same characteristics. Common stereotypes include all blondes are dumb, or all football supporters are hooligans, or all Scots are tight. When we allow stereotypes to inform our opinion of a person whom we don't yet know, we are guilty of prejudice. Discrimination means to treat someone differently because of some characteristic they have. Not all forms of discrimination are necessarily morally wrong. For example, if I tried to enter the women's changing room at my local gym, I would hopefully be told I could not enter because I am a man. This is technically discrimination, but given the context, it is totally appropriate. I'm sure you can think of other examples where this sort of discrimination is also necessary or appropriate, for example in hospitals, schools, prisons and sporting contests. However, when discrimination is motivated by prejudice, then we are probably dealing with something that is morally wrong. For example, if I don't like Scots, i.e. I have a prejudice against Scots, and therefore I refuse to let my daughter date a Scotsman, I am now guilty of discrimination too. What I have described would be considered morally wrong by many people, but it would not be illegal. However, if I ran a business and refused to employ a Scotsman, then I would be breaking the law. What is meant by the word ethnicity? The word ethnicity is commonly used to refer to physical characteristics that a person has that are shared with those who have a common ancestry. In other words, people whose ancestors come from the same place are likely to share certain physical inherited traits, such as hair colour, skin colour, height, looks, or build. Ethnicity is commonly used as a defining characteristic of a person's identity. For example, on many forms that you may fill in, you will be asked to identify your ethnicity. For example, white British, Afro-Caribbean, Indian, etc. In the UK, any ethnic group that is not white British is referred to as an ethnic minority, or sometimes minority ethnic. It is important to note that ethnicity and nationality, although commonly connected, are not the same thing. Ethnicity is based mainly on physical traits which a person inherits and cannot change. Nationality is based on a combination of factors including, but not limited to, place of birth, upbringing, nationality of parents, citizenship, and ethnicity. For example, Mo Farah, the double Olympic champion athlete, is ethnically Somali. In other words, he shares physical traits with other people with ancestors from Somalia. However, he is a British national and would be described as culturally British and has described himself as proud to be British. Why is the UK called a multi-ethnic society? The example I have just given of Mo Farah is a good example of the fact that the UK is a multi-ethnic society. This means that the UK is a country where a significant proportion of people are not from the majority ethnic group. In the 2011 census, 81.5% of people living in England and Wales identified themselves as white British. This means that 18.5%, that's nearly 1 in 5 people, identify themselves as part of an ethnic minority. The most common ethnic minority groups were white European, Indian, Pakistani, African, Caribbean and white Irish, with over 500,000 people in each of these groups. Why is the UK a multi-ethnic society? The reason for the wide ethnic diversity in the UK can be traced back through the history of the nation. The British Isles has never had indigenous inhabitants, but it has been the subject of invasions and migrations from many different groups. This includes groups such as the Celts, Picts, Romans, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, Vikings and Normans. What we today refer to as white British ethnicity is in fact a combination of all these groups. In more recent years, the UK has a history of welcoming those who have faced persecution or oppression in their own nations. For example, 19th century French Protestants or 20th century Russian Jews. Furthermore, with the expansion of the British Empire in the 19th century, in return for accepting British control, citizens of the Empire were often allowed to settle in the UK. Many people from these British colonies moved to the UK and small minority communities grew in most big cities. In the 20th century, as the Empire became what we call the Commonwealth, the UK continued to offer a home to its foreign citizens, Particularly after World War II, the British government appealed for the Commonwealth nations to send people who could help rebuild the country after the devastation of war. Significant numbers of people from countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the Caribbean responded and settled in Britain's cities. More recently, the majority of immigration into the UK has come from within the European Union. What are the advantages of living in a multi-ethnic society? Discussions about multiculturalism and immigration often prompt passionate responses on both sides of the debate. But what are the pros and cons of living in a diverse society with significant levels of immigration? Some people believe that immigration should be greatly reduced in order to protect British culture, security, and jobs. Firstly, they argue that many immigrants create a financial strain on the country by draining resources from schools, hospitals, councils, and benefits. Furthermore, they are also taking jobs away from British citizens. They argue also that the wide variety of cultures can lead to tensions among communities, which can lead to violence. For example, the Bradford race riots in 2001. Finally, they argue that the traditional British identity and culture is at risk of being lost or devalued by immigration. However, other people feel that immigration creates a net benefit for the country, bringing benefits both to the economy and enhancing the cultural mix. They argue that overall immigrants put more into the national economy than they take out. And furthermore, they bring necessary skills and labour to fulfil shortages in certain areas of the economy, such as the NHS. They also argue that cultural diversity creates a more interesting society to live in. For example, going out for a meal without the option of Chinese buffets, Indian takeaways, Italian pizzas, Turkish kebabs, and American burgers would be a less interesting country to live in. Finally, they claim that cultural diversity encourages people to be tolerant of other cultures and nationalities. What is community cohesion and what does it look like? Community cohesion is a term used by the government to describe a society or community in which people from different groups are able to coexist peacefully. Sometimes referred to as social or racial harmony, it refers to the ideology that aims to create a society where there is no prejudice or discrimination. Discrimination directly contradicts attempts to create community cohesion. Discrimination can take many forms, including racism, which is discrimination against people of a certain race or ethnicity, and sexism, discrimination against people of a particular gender. Historically, there have been famous examples of widespread discrimination against particular ethnic groups. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the global slave trade involved the mass buying and selling of African people as slaves. During World War II, the Nazi government organised the mass slaughter of 6 million Jews and other minority groups. More recently, Martin Luther King helped us successfully fight against racial segregation laws in the US. Nelson Mandela became internationally recognised as the face of the fight against the apartheid system of racial segregation in South Africa. Although these examples of widespread racial segregation are mainly a thing of the past, it is still possible to find examples of racism in the world today. In the UK, for example, the racist murder of black teenager Stephen Lawrence in 1993 revealed elements of institutional racism within the British police. In 2001, racial tensions led to widespread riots in Bradford. More recent events, such as the death of Mark Duggan, which sparked the London riots in 2011, and the use of stop and search powers by the police, continue to cause tension between the police and some ethnic minorities. Furthermore, some would point to the growth in popularity of groups like the British National Party and the English Defence League as evidence of widespread prejudice views in the UK. What does the UK government do to promote community cohesion? In the UK, there are various laws that make it illegal to discriminate against someone based on their ethnicity. In 1976, the government passed the Race Relations Act, which made it illegal to discriminate against a person based on their ethnicity, nationality, or religion. The act also made it illegal to use threatening or abusive words that could stir up racial hatred. In 2010, the government combined a number of pieces of anti-discrimination law, including the Race Relations Act and the Sex Discrimination Act, into one piece of legislation called the Equality Act. The original Race Relations Act of 1976 also included the creation of the Commission for Racial Equality. This organisation was set up to monitor the effectiveness of the law in combating racism and promoting equality, as well as to advise the government on how to promote community cohesion. In 2010, as part of the Equality Bill, the Commission for Racial Equality was renamed the Equality and Human Rights Commission, but it effectively serves the same purpose. Thanks for watching. I've been Mr. McMillan. Remember, you can download audio podcasts of all my videos from iTunes.